Okay, this is the first video of four for Chapter 6, the focus of which is motivating others. Okay, so no PowerPoint for this. You're just going to use your lecture outline. Make sure you have that handy. Okay, I'm starting out on page 1. Roman numeral 1 talks about assessments. Now, I'm going to talk about those in class, so I'm not going to talk about those in this video. The second Roman numeral basically helps us to understand, why do we even care about this topic? Why does motivation matter? In fact, it is one of the most studied topics in organizational behavior, right alongside teams and leadership. Two other topics that we'll be talking about, as it turns out. Why does it matter? Well, it has everything to do with, remember I told you about those dependent variables that we study in organizational behavior, and the number one, the most important variable that we study, the one that matters the most, was performance. Okay? And so as a result, the reason that we care about motivation is that of all the things that we might study, motivation is believed to have the greatest impact on performance. And so this explains why this is such a huge topic. Literally thousands of articles have been written on this topic. Regardless of where we're talking about, whether we're talking about for-profit institutions, nonprofit institutions, educational institutions, government agencies, doesn't matter, athletic teams, student organizations, you name it, the people who are the leaders face a common challenge of figuring out how to foster a motivating work environment, an environment in which people will be highly motivated. Phil Jackson, who had been the coach of the Bulls, the coach of the Lakers. Okay, here's what he had to say about motivation. He says, you cannot motivate someone. You cannot motivate someone. All you can do is provide a motivating environment, and the players will motivate themselves. It is with this sentiment that I agree 100%. I have said this for a long, long time, actually predating Phil Jackson saying it, and I'm not the only one who said it. Lots of people have said it. As it says in C, this is exactly right. The manager's task, your task as a leader, is to create the conditions under which people might choose to motivate themselves. Okay, might and choose. Those are key, all right? You don't control other people. You wish, perhaps, that you could control other people, but in fact, you cannot. I cannot. All we can do is create the conditions under which we hope people will choose to do what we want them to do, and if they don't, then they don't. Okay. So, and sometimes they don't. And so that takes us right into Roman numeral 3, which is diagnosing work performance problems. Oftentimes, managers or leaders assume that the source of the problem is low motivation, that's what explains why someone is not performing well. Now, that may be true, but we have to recognize that our perception of this is affected by something called the fundamental attribution error, which basically is that we assume others are inherently responsible for the negative things that happen to them. In other words, we don't assign responsibility for all that negativity to something outside that person. We assume that they're not motivated, or another possibility is that they're not able. We don't take into account things like, well, what's the impact of resources? What are some of the external factors that might in fact be influencing their performance? We jump right to motivation. In fact, what we need to understand is what performance is really a function of. And as it says under 3b, the following model provides a more complete view of performance. Performance is a function of effort times motivation. That multiplicative relationship is important. Take note of that. Ability is the product, or is a function of, aptitude times training times resources. Again, note the multiplicative relationships. Motivation, or effort, is the product of desire and commitment. Okay, again, desire times commitment. Now, all of these elements are essential. Again, as I've said, note that the relationships are multiplicative. What that implies is that if any of these were low or zero, let's say, worst case scenario, zero, If it's 0, then what you would expect is that dependent variable to also be 0. I mean, that's the nature of a multiplicative relationship. So in the case of performance overall, if either ability or motivation is 0, performance is going to be 0. If either one of those is low, performance is going to be low. When you look at ability, if aptitude, training, or resources, if 0, then you're going to have 0 ability. Or low, you're going to have low ability. And likewise, with motivation, if either desire or commitment is low or 0, you can see what happens with motivation. Okay. So that's focused overall on what performance is all about. Now let's dive into the pieces. So the first one is ability. Let's talk about ability. How do we help people to be capable? Well, there are in fact three danger signs of ability deteriorating. So people might decide to take refuge in a specialty, some technical skill that they've always had. They focus on that, perhaps instead of really focusing on what the overall job entails. They might focus on how they've done things in the past, regardless of what the current status quo is. Well, this is the way we've always done it, and that was good enough. Okay, but technology has changed. The way that we're organized has changed. I don't care. I like doing things the old way. Okay, well then, to the ability, right? It can also be the case that people will begin to exaggerate different aspects of their leadership role. For example, they might over-delegate. Basically, I'm turning over everything to my followers. I'm not going to do anything. Or the opposite, they micromanage. They're on top of you for every single thing. Let me look at that. Don't do anything until I have a chance to. Okay. Or they might decide to be pessimistic. Okay. So how can we remedy poor performance? This is at the top of page 2 of your lecture outline. 5 possibilities to be implemented in the following order. So start with resupply. So start with the assumption that maybe people don't have the resources to do their job. Find out what those resources are that are needed. Check, is there a gap between what's needed and what's available? If so, close that gap. Okay, it's not reasonable to expect people to perform at a high level when you're not giving them the resources they need to be highly capable. Second, retrain. So maybe it's not a resource issue, maybe it's a training issue. Okay, fair enough. This happens, right? Especially with something like changing technology. People may need additional training in order to be exceptional once again. So let's get them that training. Third is to refit. Maybe we need to delete a piece or two out of that person's job in order to make that job fit that person once again. If that doesn't work, we might consider reassigning the person. Can we just give them an entirely different job? One that will be, in fact, a better fit for them. Maybe the technology train has just passed them by. They are not going to catch up. It's time to start thinking about other possibilities. So let's reassign that person. If that doesn't work, if none of these work, and we still have poor performance, then we might need to think about releasing the person, terminating or firing the person. This is a last resort. And the reason it's a last resort is because we've invested a lot in that person. The whole process of hiring an individual, getting that person on board, having that person on board, this is an investment that we've made. We've expended quite a bit. And ideally, we should do everything we can to try and keep that investment, to keep it fresh, to keep that person feeling good and delivering at a high level. Now, it doesn't always work, but that should be our goal. Sometimes that doesn't work, and so then we cannot hesitate to take the steps needed to release that person. If we hesitate, if we avoid the conflict associated with terminating a person, we might be sending a message to everybody else that basically says, you know what, it's okay if you're not a very good performer. We don't actually care. And this can be incredibly frustrating for the people who are exceptional performers. They look at that and they think to themselves, why am I bothering? Now, you'll hear later this ties into something called equity theory, which is in fact very important. We all compare ourselves to other people, and if we see somebody else getting away with something, yeah, we're going to want to do the same. All right, so that section talked about ability. Now, what does it take to foster a motivating work environment. So we're going to start on that here. Now I'm about halfway, not quite halfway down on page 2, Roman numeral 5, fostering a motivating work environment. So McGregor in 1960 argued that managers, and I would say actually people, he was talking about people in general and managers, hold two different basic assumptions about motivation, about people actually, about their followers. So see where you fit in. How do you think about other people? Which assumptions do you make about other people? Do you tend to make what are called theory X assumptions about people? When we make theory X assumptions about other people, we assume, for example, that they don't want to work hard because they're indolent. Indolent meaning they are sort of actively lazy. They will do anything to avoid actual work. And as a result, we have to coerce them. We have to threaten them. And we have to keep a very close eye on them. Okay? They can't be trusted if I don't stay on top. Think about, for example, if you were managing teenagers, you might think to yourself, these people they don't even want to be here, man. So I need to keep a pretty close eye on them, and I might have to threaten punishment if they don't do what I want. That's a great example of theory X. Now note, that doesn't mean that those teenagers are actually lazy or that they actually need someone to watch them closely. These are the assumptions that you as the manager are making about them, not how they really are. The other set of assumptions are called theory Y assumptions, and these assumptions suggest that employees want to do a good job and they want to assume more responsibility. So as a result, because that's what I believe about other people, then I see my job as assisting those employees to achieving their potential. Okay? So an important point was made there. The assumptions that we make about other people dictate or drive how we treat those people. Then what happens next is those people respond to the way we treat them. So if I believe that you're lazy, that you won't do anything without me having to constantly harp on you, threaten to punish you, guess what you're going to do? You're going to start to behave as though that were true. You're going to be like, you know what? It doesn't do me any good to work hard. Doesn't do me any good to try and demonstrate that I'm not lazy. I might as well be lazy, okay? It's what she expects. It's the way she treats me. So fine, I will do it. In other words, we have a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? The Pygmalion effect. So I treat you a certain way as a result of my assumptions. You begin to behave that way. Now, go with theory Y. If I assume that all of you are highly motivated individuals, you're bright, you're highly motivated, that I don't need to constantly dog you in order to ensure that you will do things, and I behave according to those assumptions, I treat you well, I am respectful, I am kind, I do not micromanage you, guess what? You are more likely to want to rise to that respectful level of expectation, to want to be the person you know that I think you are. And so again, Pygmalion or self-fulfilling prophecy, you're more likely to perform at a high level. So what's the smart way to think about other people? Theory X or theory Y? You decide. Now, under C, it talks about the 4 ways that managers can address satisfaction performance. So what do we tend to observe? We got 4 different possibilities. One is indulging. Here we're just trying to make people happy. We're focused on satisfaction. We're not focused on their performance. And guess what we get? Followers feeling entitled. Basically, they feel spoiled. They are spoiled because we just want to make you happy. I don't really care if you get the job done or not. I just want you to be happy. That doesn't seem overall very positive, does it? The second is imposing. This is where I only care about performance and I don't care about your satisfaction. Basically, that leaves you, the followers, feeling exploited. Like I don't even see you as a human being. I just see you as the person who performs labor on my behalf. Okay? The third is ignoring. This is where as a boss I might not care about your satisfaction, nor do I care about your performance. I basically sit in my office. Please just stay out of my way. Don't bother me. And guess what we get? Without any leadership, we're going to have failure for individuals and for the organization. And the final option is integrating. This is where a manager focuses on both satisfaction and performance. So I want my employees to be happy, I want my followers to be happy, and I want them to perform at a high level. I'm going to do things that will ensure both. And as a result, what we're going to have happy employees, satisfied employees who perform at a very high level, who feel accountable, responsible for what they're asked to do. Okay. Basically, top of page 3. The best managers, the best leaders, the kind of people you should aspire to be, enable productive people who are also satisfied. And you can see how emphasizing performance and emphasizing satisfaction, how these come together in the 2x2 that you see on the top of page 3. Again, it's not good enough to focus on just one or the other, and it's certainly not good enough to ignore both. Instead, the best managers, the best leaders focus on both. That's the end of the first video.